Good morning, everyone. I am Davy Jones from the North Central Ohio Media Group. And we want you all to know that this morning's Memorial Day program here at the Bucyrus Elementary School is being videotaped by John Kreider, who's up there in the second deck. And John is our chief engineer and will be doing a televised podcast beginning late this afternoon or early this evening on CrawfordCountyNow.com. John does a great job. There's two kinds of engineering. I've talked about this in the past. There's Davy Jones engineering, and there's high-tech engineering. We need high-tech, and that's why John is here, and we're going to have that on for you a little bit later on. Broadcast coverage brought to you in part on the North Central Ohio Media Group by Jim and Jeremy Letter at Jim Letter's Body Shop. Also the Kimmerline family at Bucyrus Road Materials since 1939. Adam Weisner and Associates at Advanced Fiber Technology. Martin Bernhardt, Mike's Roofing, phone 562-5752, and Isaac King and Dylan Wyatt at McKeever and Associates. Before I introduce our Master of Ceremonies, a few items. I had some people out in the hallway who were not from around here. They were from out of town, and they were admiring our beautiful old building, and it certainly is attractive. For the benefit of those of you who were not privileged to be a part of this building or a part of Bucyrus community, this building was originally built in 1922 and served as a high school until 1969. And it is really nice. This auditorium was completely remodeled about 15 years ago. And as you can tell behind me, this is a basketball floor. Bucyrus High School actually played basketball on this stage till 1969, 1970. I'm going to go back, since I do a little bit of sports broadcasting, let you know in January 1966, it was a basketball game on this floor right here between Bucyrus and Galion. It went triple overtime. Galion won 111 to 108. Kind of the interesting thing about that, the leading scorer in the game was a guy named Michael Bones Miller, scored 48 points for Galion. Michael Bones Miller was a Vietnam veteran, and he came back home and then passed away several years ago from Agent Orange exposure in Vietnam. There was a Bucyrus young man who's no longer with us either, Jim Kirkham, and Jim scored 44 points in that game, and up until about a year ago, that was the most points ever scored in a Bucyrus basketball game. It's my privilege now to welcome to our microphones our Master of Ceremonies. Our Master of Ceremonies is Bob Laipply. Bob is a Vietnam veteran, and more important than that, he was a teacher in this building for 36 years. He taught both of our sons, and we were very thankful to have Bob as a teacher of our children at Bucyrus Middle School. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our Master of Ceremonies, Bob Laipply.
Thank you, David. Not Vietnam. Thank you, David. A correction there. I was not sent to Vietnam. I was sent to Panama to guard the canal, which we did, and then after we left, they gave it away. At this time, would you please, for the courtesy of others, turn off your cell phones. Thank you. Our invocation today will be by Pastor Jay Scott. Jay?
Let us pray. God of all people, we come before you today to honor those who have gone before us in the fight to preserve the very freedom that enables me to offer this prayer in public. We come before you humbly and with regret because we know you created this world and created us in your image with the intention that this would be a peaceful place. We confess the humanity that leads the nations of your world into war. And we gladly accept your grace as we attempt to avoid the very battles that led to the deaths of those we memorialize today. In our humanity, however, we are reminded that all things are possible with you, God. With that, we come before you this morning in a prayer of urgency, that the nations of this world will learn to love each other as Christ loves and as they would want to be loved. Where there is war, God, bring peace. Where opposing nationalities and races cannot agree, bring compromise and consensus. Where we fail to be at peace in your world, give us your guidance and strength so that we can work harder to avoid the ugliness of war. Let us not, however, go from this place forgetful of all you do in blessing this nation. As it was founded under your laws and commandments, please continue to love and protect those who are on duty, even as I offer this prayer, to ensure this nation's freedom and security. Help us to remain ready to defend this one nation under God, and teach us to be in service to you, so that when you call us home, Lord, may we all be together, not one left out. Amen.
Thank you, Jay. Now, would you please rise, if you are able, for our national anthem performed by the Bucyrus High School Band, and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. And now the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. We are honored to have for our parade marshal this year Lieutenant Colonel Doug Wilson, retired. Assistant parade marshals are all current and honorably discharged veterans. Our parade director today is Chuck Chrisman. By act of Congress and presidential decree, we have 3 separate days to salute the men and women who are serving or who have served in our military ranks. In 1947, the 3rd Saturday in May was established as Armed Forces Day to celebrate those who are currently serving. This was to recognize the combining of the Army, Navy, Marines, and Air Force under the command of the Defense Department of the United States. Veterans Day was first called Armistice Day from 1919 to 1954, when it was changed to Veterans Day by President Harry S. Truman. It is held on November 11th of each year, the 11th month, the 11th day, and the 11th hour, when Germany surrendered to end World War I. It celebrates the men and women who served in any branch of the military. Finally, we have Memorial Day, the oldest of the 3. Established in 1868 as Decoration Day to be held on May 30th each year thereafter, to decorate the graves of servicemen and women killed in action in the Civil War. The date and name were changed in 1971 to the last Monday in May. The purpose of this day is to honor those who gave the ultimate sacrifice, their very lives, to serve our country. This is a day for heroes. Their duty was to serve. Our duty is to remember. General Logan's General Order Number 11 will now be shared by Ty Bowers.
Headquarters, Grand Army of the Republic, Washington, D.C., May 5th, 1868. The 30th day of May, 1868, is designated for the purpose of strewing with flowers or otherwise decorating the graves of comrades who died in the defense of their country during the late rebellion, and whose bodies now lie in almost every city, village, and hamlet churchyard in the land. In this observance, no form or ceremony is prescribed, but posts and comrades will in their own way arrange such fitting services and testimonials with respect as circumstances may permit. We are organized, comrades, as our regulations tell us, for the purpose, among other things, of preserving and strengthening those kind and fraternal feelings which have bound together the soldiers, sailors, and Marines who united to suppress the late rebellion. What can aid more to assure this result than by cherishing tenderly the memory of our heroic dead, who made their breasts a barricade between our country and its foes. Their soldier lives were the reveille of freedom to a race in chains, and their death a tattoo of rebellious tyranny in arms. We should guard their graves with sacred vigilance. All that the consecrated wealth and tastes of a nation can add to their adornment and security is but a fitting tribute to the memory of their slain defenders. Let no wanton foot tread rudely on such hallowed grounds. Let pleasant paths invite the coming and going of reverent visitors and fond mourners. Let no vandalism of avarice or neglect, no ravages of time, testify to the present or to the coming generations that we have forgotten, as a people, the cost of freedom and an undivided republic. If other eyes grow dull, and other hands slack, and other hearts cold in the solemn trust, ours shall keep it well, as long as the light and warmth of life remain in us. Let us then, at the time appointed, gather around their sacred remains and garland the passionless mounds above them with the choicest flowers of springtime. Let us raise above them the dear old flag they saved from dishonor. Let us in this solemn presence renew our pledges to aid and assist those whom they have left among us, as a sacred charge upon the nation's gratitude, the soldiers and sailors, widow and orphan. It is the purpose of the Commander-in-Chief to inaugurate this observance with the hope it will be kept up from year to year. While a survivor of the war remains to honor the memory of his departed comrades, he earnestly desires the public press to call attention to this order and lend its friendly aid in bringing it to the notice of comrades in all parts of the country in time for simultaneous compliance therewith. Department commanders will use every effort to make this order effective. By command of John A. Logan, Commander-in-Chief. Thank you.
And now, President Lincoln's Gettysburg Address will be presented by Adison Young.
On November 19, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln dedicated a national cemetery on the battle at Gettysburg, where over 7,000 men had died. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from this earth.
Thank you, Adison. Well done. Our keynote speaker this year is Colonel Keith Newell, retired. A 1978 graduate of Upper Sandusky High School, he then received his college degree from The Ohio State University in 1982. His initial military assignment was to the Air Force Flight Test Center as a flight test engineer. Colonel Newell was selected for pilot training, and in 1990-91, he flew in Operation Desert Shield and flew combat sorties in Operation Desert Storm over Iraq. Colonel Newell's final overseas deployment was to Qatar in support of Operation Iraqi and Enduring Freedom. With more than 3,000 flight hours, including 73 combat missions, Colonel Newell has served this country with pride and with honor. Colonel Newell.
Thank you, Teacher Bob, for that introduction. A little bit long, though. So, with that said, good morning, fellow Americans. Good morning. We'll also welcome distinguished visitors, any elected officials that we have. I'm not sure exactly who all is here, but I also want to welcome one of my favorite groups of people, my brothers and sisters in arms. How many are you out there that served? Yeah, thank you so much. So, you know, these days there's an awful lot of information that you can find on the internet. So I was thinking I'd just regurgitate some of that for you today. Not really. There's actually quite a little bit you can find about Memorial Day itself. And I'm a tail-end baby boomer, generation-wise. So So I'm kind of hoping that all of you millennials and your older, I guess they're Generation Alpha kids, as well as the Gen Zers that are here, that you take today to just spend a wee little bit of time using some of the stuff that most of the old folks here really don't understand, me included, to go out and find some information about Memorial Day, how it started, and you might even consider using some AI to help you learn a little bit about why we're here today. As we celebrate our time together, though, today is not our day. Today is the day dedicated to the ones who left home but didn't return. Some of them were our family and friends, and maybe some of the veterans here, you may just owe your life to one of them. We gather in order to remember those nearly 1.5 million patriots. That's 1.5 million people. That's nearly 130 times every man, woman, and child here in Bucyrus. Every one of those patriots who've paid the ultimate price on our behalf. This is the grim reality of our freedom. Truly, no American has loved us more than the service members who have offered their last breaths to secure that which we cherish. They were true warriors who signed a blank check, payable with their lives, to us, the American people. So some of this has been covered already today, but how did we get here with the modern day Memorial Day? It was born of the Civil War, 1868, and it was called back then. It came about when our nation offered solemn salute to its fallen soldiers. So if you're out and about today, we were supposed to be over at the cemetery. If you're out and about looking at the cemetery or uptown and you see GAR, that's the Grand Army of the Republic, that had something to do with it. You may see that on headstones. You may see that on some buildings around town. If you go out to Oakwood, where we were going to be, we would have been standing right next to practically one such headstone, which is that of the Keller brothers. And I don't know if in times past during these ceremonies you've heard that name, but that's just one example. If you drive through, you can see all of the flags that were put out by the folks that do that every year. In recent decades, the traditional observance of Memorial Day evolved into just a weekend that basically signifies the end of school. Didn't get a rise from any of the school kids, so they're not listening. But that's kind of what it signifies. It's things like that, summer vacation starting, and possibly a day off from work. For many, the true meaning and purpose of this solemn day has long been forgotten, but as we know, Memorial Day is a time to respect, honor, and remember. Those three things I've found are typically much easier to do if you can actually relate to a specific person or a specific event. So I have a question for you. Is it hard to relate to those others who've served, to project yourself into their situation, to fully understand their sacrifices? I served, and it's difficult for me to do that. How easy for it is you, most of whom, by the show of hands, have some attachment to a military background. And being that I'm an audio guy, I should know how to fix this. I apologize for that feedback. But how is it easy or not for you to relate to the fact that during Vietnam, we lost an average of 12 American soldiers every day? In Korea, that was 33 a day, and when you get to World War II, that bumped up to over 12 every hour. That's mind-boggling to me to try to understand that and to be able to relate to that. You may not know that American hero, but the losses reach into every community in America. And you don't have to venture very far, and if we were at the cemetery, you certainly wouldn't have to venture very far from where we would have been standing to see the final resting place of the John and Mary Keller family. And just to give you a glimpse into their life, John and Mary had eight kids. Two of their sons, Captain Amos Keller, who was 40, and his brother, Lieutenant Aaron Kelly. He was 30, born almost exactly 10 years apart. They were both mortally wounded in the Battle of Stones River near Murfreesboro, Tennessee, the 31st of December in 1862. And within a couple weeks, both of them had passed away. They're buried out in the cemetery where we're going to be today. A third brother, Joseph, who was 24, he was marching with them, and he likely would have been killed, but he was succumbed by battle exhaustion, and he was put in the hospital, so he never made it to that final battle place. Try to imagine that march, what they went through. We're talking that's 600 miles from where we are here today, as the crow flies. That's hard to relate to, at least it is for me. Try to relate what their anxious family members who were left behind went through. What do you think it was like for them to stay in touch with one another? That's another thing we take for granted. I mean, we had this, everybody silence your cell phones. We don't even think twice about it. We're constantly in contact with everybody these days. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my side of the family and my attachment. It's more of an upper thing, but there is a Crawford County attachment here. An ancestor on my mom's side, my first cousin, that would be 4 times removed for any people that do genealogy. It was Joel Gibson. He was born in western Crawford County, so there it is, in what would become Wyandotte County by Joel's 3rd birthday. He fought in the Civil War as part of the 123rd OVI, Company F, and I can't imagine what the thousands of families went through as they saw their loved ones leave town to uncertain futures. Joel was one of the lucky ones that made it home, although not unscathed. He was wounded in his right thigh with a musket ball during the Battle of Winchester in June of 1863. He was captured, had his leg amputated by federal surgeons, and at Taylor Hospital, it was right downtown Winchester. Try to imagine that. I can't, because when I try to imagine that, I think of all our modern conveniences, and they had none of those. Just even the facilities he went into to have his leg amputated. That boggles my mind. Eventually that town was captured by the North, and he was sent back to Upper in February of 1864. And as you can imagine, his amputation had been so quickly done, hastily and unskillfully, that when he got back to Upper, he had to have a second surgery. So once he got home, got all healed up, he went to Cleveland, got a law degree, and he held various positions over in Upper to include Justice of the Peace, probate judge, and eventually the mayor, and he was the mayor during the 1900 dedication of the courthouse that still stands today over there. So now you're asking, Keith, why are you sharing all these old details with us? Remember I asked what it was like staying in touch? Everything that I just told you happened without the internet. It happened without cell phones. It happened without any phones, for that matter. It happened without CNN or any instant news where you have embedded people doing the news from the battlefield. And for the guys and gals that have service may appreciate this last thing a little bit. It also happened without motorized infantry, unless you consider a horse motorized. That's hard for me to imagine. It really makes it hard to relate to, doesn't it? It does for me. So now let's fast forward about 150 plus years to when I was still serving. I'd like to share some thoughts about one of my many military friends that I unfortunately lost during my years in the Air Force. As you heard, my last overseas deployment was Qatar in 2005, and 2 years after that, in 2007, our unit got called back over to the sandbox again. In those 2 years, good news, bad news. I got promoted. The bad news was they didn't let me go with my troops. It was the first time that I was not allowed to go for a real-world deployment, and as you can imagine, it did not make me happy to have to stay stateside. During that time period, however, another one of my aviators and one of my best pilots was getting ready to graduate from the Air Force version of the Top Gun school out at Las Vegas, Nevada. My wife, Dawn, and I, we took a trip out there to help celebrate the graduation ceremony, and late one afternoon, we were getting ready to leave the hotel and head out to the Officers Club for some pre-graduation ceremonies and celebrating and just an overall good time. And my work cell phone rang. And yes, Those were the days where I had to carry two phones, a work one and my personal one. So I answer it. And at first I didn't think anybody was there, and after a really healthy delay, I hear a voice on the other end that I recognized, and they ask me, "Is this Colonel Newell?" I sensed that good news was not forthcoming, since this individual and I normally referred to each other by our call signs. I'm Shadow. He continued, "Sir, we lost a jet. That's all I can tell you. Can you get to the command post and call me back on a secure line?" I hustled to get out to the base, only to learn that a dear friend of mine, Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Sonnenberg, his call sign was Sonny, he'd taken off in his F-16 in the middle of the night and didn't come back. Sonny was someone that you could all relate to. I'm absolutely positive of that. He grew up in rural Henry County outside of a small community of McClure in northwest Ohio. And McClure's population is somewhere 700, 1,000 or so, but basically it's just slightly smaller than New Washington here in Crawford County. Sonny wrestled and played football in school and helped on the family farm, and in his adult life, he continued to farm. He flew as a commercial airline pilot with Delta Airlines, and he flew F-16s with us, the 180 Fighter Wing in Toledo. And Sonny was about as laid back as they come and a great fighter pilot. Those who've grown up in rural Ohio, as many of you here have today, I'm sure would have loved Sonny. One of my favorite things of his was a small bumper sticker that he had on his flying equipment locker that said, "I farm, you eat." As my good friend and squadron commander, Lieutenant Colonel Scott Reed, call sign Scooter, who was leading our troops in Iraq at the time, relayed to me, when Sonny's F-16 went down, every aircraft that was airborne at the time immediately stopped what they were doing, checked in on the radio, and volunteered to help in any way that they could. They may not have known Sonny personally, but one of their brothers was on the ground in bad guy country, and they were prepared to do whatever it took to defend him. Simultaneously, our ground forces raced across the desert to the crash site and rapidly secured the area. It was dangerous work because every terrorist and insurgent would have liked nothing better than to get there first and to file an American hero. When they finally confirmed that Colonel Sonnenberg had been killed in action, Scooter picked up the phone on the other side of the world to call Sonny's mom, dad, and 3 sisters at home in McClure. We had representatives there with them when the call came in, and our hearts were broken for them. Their lives would never be the same. None of us could imagine their grief, but Colonel Reed tried to explain the process of sending Sonny home to them. Sonny's mom listened patiently and asked him a single question after he was done. And that all helped us to understand what it's like to be a Gold Star family who's lost someone. She just asked, "Will Kevin be alone?" That, ladies and gentlemen, is a mother's love and pain laid bare. Colonel Reed assured her that Sonny would never be alone on that long flight home, and we all felt the depth of the sacrifice that he'd made, like dipping a toe into the ocean. Sonny left behind Lauren and his wife Lauren and a son, and her mission became one of preparation. Lauren started the Sonny Smiles Foundation, and that was solely to help service members prepare for the worst like she had gone through. So now I get a chuckle after that part a little bit, because when I think of Sonny, it makes me laugh, because I can hear him right now. He goes, "Shadow, why are you wasting all these people's time telling them about me?" That's how humble he was. Just as we saw on 9/11, Sonny was a courageous guy. If there was ever a catastrophe, he'd be one of those that's running toward it, not away from it. It's really that spirit today that brings us together. It's that spirit that we honor and remember. It's that spirit that we're charged with passing down to future generations. And as we leave here today, let's all carry a little piece of that spirit with us. In closing, you know, freedom isn't free, and for those that protect it, freedom has a special meaning that the protected will likely never know. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Colonel. And now we will hear the Battle Hymn of the Republic performed by the Bucyrus Middle School Band. Yay to the middle school band. Thank you, Mr. Laipply. I've been asked to make an announcement about the Memorial Day hog roast held at the American Legion on Rensselaer Street after this program. The meal is free to all veterans and will also be available to family and friends through a free will donation. Also, this program can be heard on WQEL, WBCO later today and on Crawford County Now face pages. We would also like to thank the members of the Veteran Memorial Society and other volunteers for placing over 3,500 American flags on the graves of veterans in Bucyrus and the surrounding township. If you were involved in that program, would you please stand up now? Thank you for your service and dedication. Our benediction today is by Pastor Jay Scott.
Now receive the blessing. May you love God so much that you can love nothing else more. And may you fear God so much that you fear nothing else. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
And now, the salute to the dead by the Bucyrus Area Veterans Honor Guard. Please stand. And now we will hear. That was Taps, played by Jenna Ashley, and the echo was provided by Tami Myers. Thank you all for coming. Assembly dismissed.